Hey everybody, and welcome back. I hope the first week of school is going well for everybody. Stay safe. Obviously, we're in the safety business, and it's always a special time when the kids are all excited about going back to school. Give it a couple of weeks, and that'll be worn off, and be hard to get them in school. But I hope so far so good. This is the first week, and I've been keeping up with everybody's photographs of first day back. For our office, we are straight away right back into it. It's like we never get a break. We're in court this week, not only in trials and pleas in Horry, but we also have a series of motion hearings. So I'll talk with you a little bit later about how that went. For the first couple of weeks of August, it's been extremely busy with trials. So I'm going to go through a few of those of significance with you, some pleas and some trials. First off, out of Georgetown, on August the 11th, we had a young man, well, not a young man, he's Corey Rutledge, 48, of Georgetown, sentenced to 11 years for distribution of crack cocaine, second offense. So drug charges, just like shoplifting and some of the others, are enhanceable. Second offense carries a lot more time than first offense. And there's mandatory minimums on those. So that's why you see a lot of these cases end up in pleas, because there's such a high end to those. Distribution of crack, second offense for Corey Rutledge, and he received 11 years. He will have to serve 85% of that time before he is eligible for parole. So if he gets parole at the first time that he's eligible, he is 48 now, he will be about 57 when he comes up for parole. And there's a lot of confusion about that, and I think the legislature has set it to be confusing. But those non-parolable offenses, you serve the better part of those. In another drug case out of Horry, it was possession with intent, which is the same charge as distribution under the same statute. This was heroin, possession with intent to distribute. Second, Jamal Daniels, 28 years old, of Myrtle Beach, pled guilty to that. He was on the trial roster. He received 16 years. So he will probably serve about 13 and a half before he becomes eligible for parole. That is second offense, possession with intent to distribute. The difference between distribution and possession with intent is, and again, it's all under the same statute, all under the same sentencing guidelines, but distribution is when actually you hand drugs to someone else, they hand you money, and you have distributed those drugs for money or some other sort of benefit. Possession with intent to distribute is what we're charging the person with, is saying you had an amount of cocaine or crack cocaine or heroin that was of such weight, or the carrying of those makes it very easy for a jury or a person to figure out that you meant to distribute it. It wasn't for personal use. How do we do that? Well, if you got 3 cakes in your vehicle, it means that you're not going to eat all 3 of those cakes. The weight, the size, the way they're packaged. If you were to get cocaine and there would be a scale in the car with it, or money, or packing devices like bags, or a book that shows who you've sold to in the past, that's how we prove intent to distribute. But for our purposes, whether you distributed it, handed it off, or you possessed it with intent to distribute, the law is the same. The real kicker is, what offense is it? Have you been busted for possession or selling coke in the past? If so, that'll make it a second or a third, and those numbers get up rather drastically. All right. In another case, this case actually started and went to trial. It was tried by our senior prosecutor, Josh Holford, and hats off to a young man in our office, Adam Harrelson. They did a great job together. Started the case on Monday. I think it ended on Wednesday. It was a murder trial out of Loris. The defendant, Deshaun Brown, 28 years old, of Loris, was convicted of killing Bo Durant. This was a murder. Some of y'all up around that area may remember it, but it was right behind the CVS in Loris, sort of to give you a point of reference. It appears that Deshaun Brown jumped out of his vehicle and fired several shots into the vehicle driven by Charles Bo Durant, and it killed Bo Durant. It also severely injured his girlfriend at the time. She came in and testified of the events that took place back in 2018. Tyshawn Brown of Loris was convicted. He received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in South Carolina. That means for the rest of your natural life. There's a ton of confusion on that issue because the law changed in the early 90s. Before that, you would come up for parole after 20 years. Now, life means life. It means that you will die in prison. They will leave you in just a little bit longer to make sure you're dead, and then they'll take you out and bury you. That's the way to get out of life imprisonment, and that is what Tyshawn Brown got. Now, of course, he will appeal and PCR, and that'll go on forever, but Tyshawn Brown received life imprisonment for killing these Bo Durant and severely injuring his girlfriend in Loris. And finally, I want to talk with you about a case that we don't see very often, but it's called a waiver hearing. So juveniles commit the same crimes that adults commit, right? Shoplifting, some crimes that only juveniles can commit, like status offenses, runaway. Adult can't run away. Adult can't skip school. But a lot of the stuff is the same thing that adults do. And I'm not going to give the name because, in my mind, even though he has been waived up as an adult, and I think technically we could give the name, this young man is 16. He is accused of working with a co-defendant, and he's charged with rape, robbery, attempted murder, and assault charges. These charges took place out at Coastal Carolina University. The charges are still pending. But this first set was what we call a waiver hearing, where just by your age, you, if nothing was done, a juvenile goes to family court. A family court judge hears the case. There's no right to a jury for juveniles. But in certain circumstances, when the crimes are egregious, the state will go in front of the family court judge and ask that judge to waive the juvenile up and let's treat him as an adult. So that is a mini trial that takes place. The juvenile is represented by a defense attorney, and you're basically arguing over 7 factors. It's called Kent factors, which looks at, how progressed this juvenile is, what were the circumstances surrounding the crime? Did he work with someone else? Those are 3 of the 7. But the judge will hear that and determine whether or not the young man should be, or young lady should be, treated as an adult or as a child. If the person is not waived up, if the judge doesn't agree with the state, then there would be another trial in juvenile court or a plea, and that person could be sentenced for a relatively low amount, because you can't keep a juvenile in right on and right on. We believe that these charges were worthy of being waived up as an adult. And so I believe he was 16 at the time in South Carolina. You're an adult at 18. That's another law change. Used to, you were treated as, it varied, but at 16, at 17. Now it's 18, and if you want somebody treated differently, you have to have a waiver hearing, which is what we had the week of August 12th in family court. The judge did agree with the state and waived up the juvenile. He will be treated as an adult now with his co-defendant in General Sessions Court. So he's looking at very serious charges. And I want to say an awful lot about that case, because I don't want to hurt his right to get a fair trial. Now he will have the opportunity to have a jury of his peers, so that's where 12 people come in. They listen to the admissible evidence that the state puts on. They listen to anything that the defense attorney's got to say, and then the jury, in this case, since he's been waived up, will make the determination of whether or not he's guilty or not guilty. Then the judge, he is there for sentencing. So the judge makes sure you get a fair trial, and then his role shifts at the end if the person is found guilty, and then will sentence appropriately. And obviously, General Sessions judges will also take into account the age of the defendant. So there's a lot that goes into their job, and we see it all the time on our comments. Why would this guy get 11 years for distribution of cocaine second, and this guy gets 16 years for distribution of cocaine second? There's a lot that goes into that, you know, it's sometimes it's the personality of the judge. More times than often, it's what is that person's prior history, or what's the facts that took place. In this case, if the juvenile is convicted as an adult, the judge will certainly take into account how old or young that person is. So obviously a ton of stuff going on last week, a ton going on this week. We stay busy. It's not just for us, for teachers. They're really getting back into the swing of thing after a short vacation. There's no vacation for prosecutors. We basically have court all the time. If we're not in court, we're preparing for court. So it's a tough job, and it's always trying to figure out you know, what's best. We'll have one group over in plea court today, another trial judge preparing and listening to a trial. So a bunch going on, and you got I think they're off in Georgetown this week preparing for another set of court. A lot more people, a lot more crime in Horry than in Georgetown. Anyway, I hope y'all have a great week, and we'll get back together next week and discuss what took place this week in court.